Welcome to Cheating Tales Lab. We're grateful you've chosen to join us today. Tell us, which part of the world are you watching from? Big city? Small town? Country? We'd love to know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Dominic Russo built things that lasted. From the custom furniture pieces he crafted in his workshop to the reputation he'd established over 15 years as the finest custom home architect in Lakeside County, he was known for solidity. His signature glass and timber designs dotted the hillsides overlooking Lake Geneva, each one a testament to his philosophy that beauty should never compromise strength. At 42, Dom had the weathered hands of a craftsman and the calculating mind of an engineer. The locals called him the Builder, though never to his face. He wasn't a man who invited familiarity. His employees respected rather than liked him, appreciating his fairness but wary of his exacting standards. When he'd met Melanie Parker 12 years ago, she was a realtor with ambition that matched his own. She had copper-red hair, a laugh that made strangers turn their heads, and a ruthless streak in business negotiations that he found irresistible. Their courtship had been swift, two strong-willed individuals recognizing the advantage of alliance. "You know what makes us different from other couples?" Melanie had asked on their wedding night. "We see each other clearly. No illusions." For a decade, their partnership thrived. Dom's architectural firm expanded while Melanie built her own luxury real estate empire. They lived in the first house he'd ever designed, perched on the highest point overlooking the lake, with 3 walls of glass framing the view. Their trophy home, locals called it, a glass castle for lakeside royalty. If their marriage lacked warmth, it compensated with mutual respect and shared goals. They didn't want children. They wanted empire. And they'd built it. Until Alexander Reed moved to town. Reed arrived with money and mystery. A novelist, they said. His books sold well enough that he could afford one of Dom's designs, a glass and cedar retreat nestled in the woods. During the consultation, Dom noticed how Melanie's posture changed around Reed, a slight lifting of her chin, a deliberate crossing of her legs. He filed the observation away, but said nothing. Dom had never been the jealous type. Jealousy suggested insecurity, and insecurity was weakness. Instead, when he suspected Melanie's business lunches with Reed were something more, he noted the pattern. When she began spending extra hours staging properties, he logged the discrepancies. When her sister Portia began covering for her with flimsy excuses, he documented them all. Dominic Russo didn't confront. He collected. Because everyone who'd ever underestimated Dom learned the same lesson. He might have been quiet, but he was always watching. And he never, ever forgot. As Melanie's mother Vivian once observed to a friend, "My son-in-law reminds me of those ancient trees that survive forest fires. You don't notice them until everything else is burned." And as summer turned to fall, and fall to winter, the kindling around Dom's marriage accumulated, waiting for a spark. Chapter 2. Hairline Fractures. February brought the annual Russo family gathering. Dom's father had insisted on continuing the tradition of a winter barbecue despite the snow. "In Sicily, we'd be grilling in the sunshine," he'd declare, as though sheer Mediterranean wool could melt Wisconsin ice. Dom watched Melanie from across his parents' backyard. She stood with her phone turned away, typing rapidly, the corner of her mouth lifted in that private smile he hadn't seen directed at him in months. Her sister Portia approached her, whispered something, and Melanie quickly pocketed the phone. Later that night, while Melanie was in the bathroom, her phone chimed with a message. Dom had never checked her phone before. Respect for privacy had been one of their unspoken rules. But something cold and certain had settled in his chest over the past months. Knowledge without evidence. The message preview showed only, "Last night was worth the wait." Same time. Dom set the phone down exactly as he'd found it. He didn't need to read more. The confirmation merely solidified what he'd already accepted. But knowledge wasn't power, not yet. Timing would determine that. 2 days later, he followed Melanie to Reed's house. He didn't confront them. He simply watched through the vast windows, Reed's home, like all of Dom's designs, betraying its occupants with transparency. Then he drove home and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. "She's been seeing him for 4 months. Dom told his reflection in the glass wall overlooking the lake. "The question is why she's still here." The answer came 3 weeks later, when Dom returned early from a site visit and overheard Melanie on a call in her home office. Mom, I understand the risks, she was saying. But the prenup only protects his premarital assets. Everything the firm has built during our marriage is fair game. And Reed found the perfect lawyer. Dom stepped away silently. The pieces aligned with brutal clarity. 3 years earlier, he'd restructured his architectural firm, making Melanie a partner with 40% ownership, a tax strategy their accountant had recommended. With the firm now valued at over $15 million, she stood to walk away with $6 million in a divorce. At dinner that night, Melanie asked about his day with practiced interest. He matched her performance with his own. Johnson's Lake House project is coming along well, he replied, refilling her wine glass. We should have the update meeting next week. Another toast to our success. She clinked glasses with him, her eyes calculating behind her smile. To building things that last. Indeed, Dom agreed. Those that deserve to. That night, as she slept beside him, Dom stared at the ceiling and methodically dismantled their marriage in his mind, examining each component for its true value. By dawn, he had the beginnings of a blueprint for what would come next. What Melanie had never understood was that Dom hadn't succeeded by chance. His father, a Sicilian immigrant who built a construction business from nothing, had taught him that survival required seeing 10 moves ahead. And revenge, that ancient Sicilian tradition, required 20. Chapter 3, The Breaking Point. The Memorial Day barbecue at Melanie's family home had always been a performance of familial harmony. Dom arrived with his signature bourbon-glazed ribs and a composure hardened by months of observation. Her mother Vivian's lakefront property was modest compared to their glass house, but what it lacked in architectural distinction it made up for in strategic value, private beach access, and seclusion. Dom had offered to design them a new home years ago, but Vivian had refused. I don't trust beautiful things, she told him. What she meant was, I don't trust you. The feeling was mutual. Portia was already 3 drinks in when Dom arrived. Her husband Todd, a meek accountant who managed the books for Melanie's real estate business, gave Dom a nod that was almost apologetic. The builder graces us with his presence, Portia announced too loudly, raising her glass. And bearing meat, how appropriate. Dom smiled thinly. Always a pleasure, Portia. He watched Melanie and Reed circulate separately, their practiced distance betrayed by brief glances laden with meaning. Melanie's divorce preparations were accelerating. Last week, he discovered she'd copied files from his home office, client lists, contracts, financial projections. The firm's intellectual capital. Dom manned the grill, a position that allowed him to observe while appearing occupied. As the afternoon wore on and the alcohol flowed, family dynamics emerged like cracks in poorly cured concrete. It was nearing sunset when Portia stumbled over to Dom by the grill. She'd been watching him with increasing intensity throughout the day, her filter dissolving with each glass of wine. You know, Dom, she slurred, you're a good guy. Too good for her. She's been sleeping with Oops. The confession hung in the air between them. Dom remained perfectly still, tongs suspended over the grill. Melanie and Vivian materialized instantly, flanking Portia like guards. She's had too much, Melanie said tightly, gripping her sister's arm. Dom watched them drag Portia toward the house. I should help, he said to no one in particular, following at a distance. In the hallway outside the guest bathroom, he heard Vivian's venomous whisper. You fool. You almost ruined everything. He can't know until next week. Our lawyer is still working. Portia's intoxicated sobbing provided cover for Dom's quiet retreat. He returned to the grill, shut it down methodically, and packed away the leftover food. When Melanie finally emerged from the house, he was loading the car. Portia's such a mess, she sighed. Always creating drama. Dom nodded. Family's complicated. She didn't say anything. Weird to you, did she? He looked at his wife of 11 years, this stranger with familiar features, and allowed himself one moment of genuine response. Nothing I didn't already know, Mel. The flash of alarm in her eyes was quickly concealed. She's drunk and jealous. Has been since college. Dom closed the trunk. Ready to head home? The drive back was silent. When they arrived at their glass house, Dom declined her suggestion of a nightcap. Actually, I need to make a call. Business matter. In his office, he dialed his own lawyer, Vincent Costello, not the family attorney who had handled their prenuptial agreement, but the man who had represented his father in more delicate matters. Vincent, it's Dominic Russo. I need your help. He paused. It's happening. The lawyer's response was immediate. I'll be at the shipyard diner tomorrow at 7 a.m. I'll be there. Dom ended the call and stared out at the lake, transforming rage into precision. Everything in his life, from his architectural designs to his business strategy, had been built on careful planning. This would be his masterpiece. Later, as Melanie slept, Dom packed a single bag with essentials, transferred it to his truck, and returned to bed. He lay beside his wife for the last time, studying her face in the moonlight that filtered through their glass walls. In the morning, she would wake to find him gone, set into motion a plan she had no way of anticipating. By then, he would already be far beyond her reach. Dom closed his eyes. The foundation is laid, he whispered to himself, a ritual from his construction days. Now we build. Chapter 4, The Phantom. Vincent Costello had represented 3 generations of Russos through business formations, divorces, and occasional brushes with more serious legal trouble. His silver hair and round glasses gave him a professorial appearance that belied his shark-like instincts. She's planning to file next week, Dom explained over coffee at the shipyard diner, a working-class establishment where neither Melanie nor her friends would be caught dead. Her mother mentioned their lawyer is still working. Vincent nodded, making notes in his leather-bound planner. And you've documented the affair? Enough to establish pattern. But that's not my priority. It should be, Vincent countered. Wisconsin is a no-fault state, but infidelity can influence property division if we argue. I'm not interested in favorable terms, Vincent. I want erasure. The lawyer stopped writing. Explain. Dom leaned forward. They think I'm just a husband to divorce, a partner to buy out. They don't understand what I'm capable of. His voice remained quiet, but something in his tone made Vincent set down his pen. I need to disappear completely, then return on my terms. Vincent studied him. Disappear how? Legally, financially, physically. I need a ghost period where no one can find me. Call it a strategic absence. That's extreme, Vincent said carefully, and potentially damaging to your position in divorce proceedings. Dom's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm not planning to be divorced. I'm planning to be reborn. For the next 3 hours, they outlined the framework of Dom's strategy. Vincent would act as intermediary for a series of financial maneuvers. Nothing illegal, but complex enough to be untraceable in the short term. Dom would need to drop off the radar entirely. What about your projects? Your clients? Vincent asked. My project manager Carlo can handle the current builds. As for new business, Dom shrugged. Sometimes you sacrifice a pawn to take the queen. After breakfast, Dom drove to a small bank in the next county where he kept a safe deposit box unknown to Melanie. Inside were cash, passport documents, and a prepaid phone. He withdrew everything, locked the empty box, and surrendered the key. Next, he drove to a storage facility where he rented a small unit under his father's name. There, he exchanged his luxury SUV for a nondescript used truck he'd purchased through a private sale months earlier. The vehicle wasn't registered in his name. By noon, Dom had activated the prepaid phone, transferred a significant but legal amount of cash to an account Vincent had established, and was crossing the state line. His destination was a remote cabin in the Michigan Upper Peninsula, a property he'd acquired 5 years earlier through a construction LLC when he'd renovated it for a client who couldn't pay. The client had signed over the deed instead. It wasn't in any record connected to Dom's name. Meanwhile, Melanie's day proceeded normally until she returned home at 6 to find Dom absent. She called his cell, which went straight to voicemail. By 9, mild irritation had transformed into concern. By midnight, after calling his friends in his office, concern became panic. At 3:17 a.m., Melanie called her mother. He's gone, she said without preamble. And I think he knows. Vivian's voice was sharp. What do you mean gone? Not here. Not answering calls. His overnight bag is missing. Have you checked your accounts? Melanie had. Joint checking, savings, investment portfolio, all untouched. His personal accounts showed no unusual activity. Everything looks normal, she admitted. But something's wrong. He's probably just cooling off, Vivian reasoned. Men do that. He'll be back once he processes it. But Dominic Russo didn't return the next day, or the one after. On day 3, Melanie filed a missing persons report with the local police. They found Dom's SUV in the airport's long-term parking, but couldn't confirm he'd boarded any flights. His passport hadn't been used. On day 5, Melanie contacted their family lawyer, Howard Bremer, who attempted to reach Vincent Costello. Vincent reported that Dom had consulted him about business restructuring, but hadn't mentioned travel plans. By day 7, Melanie was frantic. She called Dom's father, who listened to her story in silence before responding with typical Sicilian brevity. "My son is not missing. He is elsewhere." "What does that mean?" Melanie demanded. "It means he knows what you've done, and he is deciding what comes next." Melanie called Dom's phone for the 33rd time that week. When his voicemail picked up, she finally broke. "Nick, please," she used the nickname only family called him. "Whatever you think you know, we can talk about it. Just come home." In his Michigan cabin, Dom played the message on speaker while staring into the fireplace. The walls were bare wood, the furnishings minimal. The only luxury was a drafting table by the window where he'd spent the past week creating designs unlike anything he'd done before. These weren't buildings. They were demolitions. He set down his pencil and studied the intricate plans he'd crafted, not for construction, but for systematic destruction. Each page represented a phase in the dismantling of Melanie's world, Reed's security, and Vivian's control. Dom took a photo of Melanie from his wallet, their wedding day, her smile confident and possessive. He placed it in the fire and watched it curl into ash. "Now," he said to the empty room, "we begin." Chapter 5. The Architect of Shadows. The first month of Dom's disappearance transformed panic into opportunity for those who thought they'd outmaneuvered him. Melanie, with coaching from Vivian and legal guidance from their new attorney, transitioned from concerned wife to pragmatic businesswoman. He abandoned the business, the marriage, everything, she explained to their mutual friends. The sympathy she received was gratifying. "I'm just trying to keep his legacy alive." With Dom's mysterious absence, Melanie leveraged her 40% ownership to assert emergency control of Russo Architectural Design. The firm's employees, loyal to Dom but concerned about their livelihoods, reluctantly accepted her leadership. Reed, maintaining public distance but private intimacy, counseled her through the transition. "He's given you a gift," he told her one night in his bed. "No messy divorce, no public battle. Just absence." "It doesn't make sense," Melanie insisted. "Dom isn't impulsive. Everything he does has purpose." Reed kissed her shoulder. Maybe his purpose was surrender. Meanwhile, in northern Michigan, Dom had established a new rhythm. Mornings for physical training, running through dense forest, swimming in the icy lake, splitting wood until his muscles burned. Afternoons for strategy, meticulously researching, documenting, and revising his plans. Evenings for creation, designing the instruments of his return. He'd grown a beard, lost 15 pounds, hardened not just his body, but his resolve. Vincent visited once, bringing supplies and information. He was startled by Dom's transformation. "You look different," the lawyer observed. "I am different," Dom replied. Updates. Vincent's report was thorough. Melanie had filed for divorce, claiming abandonment. The court had granted her temporary control of the business. She'd moved Reed into the glass house. "They're not even pretending anymore," Vincent noted. Dom nodded. "Predictable. What about Carlo? Your project manager is cooperating outwardly, but contacts me weekly. He's loyal to you. And my father? Says to tell you. The underground time is necessary." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" Dom almost smiled. "Family history. When my grandfather needed to escape certain business associates in Sicily, he lived in a hidden room beneath his vineyard for 8 months. My father calls it the underground time, the period of waiting before justice." Vincent hesitated. "I should advise you that whatever you're planning." "You don't want details," Dom interrupted. "I understand, but I need something from you." He handed Vincent a sealed envelope. "In exactly 2 weeks, deliver this to Carlo. Tell him to follow the instructions precisely." After Vincent departed, Dom returned to his drafting table. The plan had 3 phases, like his architectural projects: foundation, framework, finish. The foundation was laid. His disappearance had created the necessary conditions. Melanie and her conspirators believed they'd won. They were building their new lives on what they perceived as his surrender. Now came the framework phase. From his isolated cabin, Dom began making calls using untraceable prepaid phones. To former clients who'd been approached by Melanie. To suppliers who'd worked with his firm for years. To contractors who owed him favors. His message was always the same: "I'm watching. I'll return. Choose wisely." Some dismissed these cryptic communications. Others, who knew Dom's reputation for methodical retribution, grew uneasy. 2 weeks after Vincent's visit, Carlo received the sealed instructions. The next day, he requested an urgent meeting with Melanie. "We have a problem," he announced, placing a folder on her desk in what had been Dom's office. "3 major clients are pulling their projects." Melanie frowned. "Why?" "We're on schedule, on budget. They're saying they contracted specifically with Dominic Russo. Without him, they want out." Carlo shrugged. "They're willing to pay the cancellation penalties. That's nearly $2 million in lost revenue," Melanie calculated. "Who's behind this?" Carlo maintained a neutral expression. They made their decisions independently. But they hadn't. Dom's instructions to Carlo had included detailed information about each client, personal issues, business concerns, financial pressures. Carlo had simply applied the right leverage to each. Over the next month, Russo Architectural Design hemorrhaged clients. Simultaneously, suppliers began requiring payment up front, citing management changes as justification for altering long-standing credit arrangements. The firm's cash position deteriorated rapidly. Melanie was forced to secure a high-interest loan using the glass house as collateral. "He's behind this," she raged to Reed one night. "Somehow, he's orchestrating it." Reed, whose own financial position was less robust than he'd represented, grew increasingly concerned. "Your 40% is still worth millions on paper," he reasoned. "We can sell your stake, start fresh somewhere else." But when Melanie approached potential buyers, she discovered another obstacle. The firm's intellectual property, the innovative designs that made Russo Architectural valuable, was protected by separate copyright registrations in Dom's name personally, not the company's. Without access to his design library, her 40% stake was worth a fraction of its previous value. In the 3rd month of Dom's absence, Vivian convened a strategy session at her home. Present were Melanie, Reed, and their attorney. "We're being systematically dismantled," Melanie admitted. "The business is faltering, the house is leveraged, and our legal position weakens the longer he's gone." The attorney cleared his throat. "There's another concern. If we can't prove death or establish continued abandonment, the divorce proceedings stall. And without a divorce, your claim to marital assets remains theoretical." "Can't we declare him dead?" Vivian asked impatiently. "Wisconsin requires 5 years of unexplained absence," the lawyer explained. "Unless we have evidence of peril or death." Vivian's expression darkened. "Then perhaps we need to create such evidence." The room fell silent. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Reed finally asked. "I'm suggesting," Vivian said carefully, "that we consider all options for resolving this situation permanently." In his Michigan cabin, Dom received a text from an unexpected source, Todd, Portia's meek accountant husband. The message was brief. "They're talking about having you declared dead, possibly arranging it." Careful. Dom hadn't accounted for Todd. Perhaps there were more pieces in play than he'd realized. He added a note to his plans, assessed Todd's potential. Then he reached for his phone and made a call he'd been preparing for months. "It's time," he told Vincent. "Initiate the framework collapse." Far from Melanie's awareness, the legal infrastructure of her world was about to crumble. Chapter 6. The Resurrection. 4 months after vanishing, Dominic Russo returned, not physically, but as a legal entity asserting his rights through a blitzkrieg of legal filings orchestrated by Vincent Costello. At 9 a.m. on a Monday, simultaneous motions were filed in 3 different courts. First, a petition to the business court challenging Melanie's emergency control of the firm, accompanied by evidence that Dom had been in regular contact with Carlo throughout his absence, actively directing major business decisions. The abandonment claim that justified her takeover was revealed as fiction. Second, a civil complaint against Reed for tortious interference with business relationships, supported by documentation showing how Reed had deliberately targeted Dom's marriage to gain access to his architectural expertise and client base. Third, a criminal complaint against Vivian for conspiracy to commit fraud, based on recorded conversations where she discussed creating false evidence of Dom's death. The recordings had come from Todd, who had been quietly gathering evidence since before Dom's disappearance. Driven by years of enduring Vivian's manipulation and Portia's infidelity, Todd had found in Dom an unlikely ally. By noon, the news had spread throughout Lakeside County. By evening, It reached national architectural publications. Missing design star returns with vengeance. Melanie learned of the filings when reporters began calling for comment. She immediately contacted their attorney, who was already drowning in motions and evidence packages. This is a coordinated attack, the lawyer explained, overwhelmed. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. And he has evidence, Melanie. Recordings, documents, witness statements. What about our case? She demanded. What about the divorce? His legal team filed a counterpetition alleging fraud and conspiracy. They're requesting the divorce action be stayed pending criminal investigation. Criminal? Melanie's voice rose. What criminal investigation? The attorney hesitated. The conspiracy charges against your mother are serious. And there's more. They've submitted evidence suggesting you and Reed discussed having Dominic permanently resolved. That's absurd. We never. Melanie stopped, remembering Vivian's words at their strategy session. The following day, a judge granted Vincent's request for a temporary restraining order preventing Melanie from accessing the firm's accounts or entering its offices. Carlo was named interim manager. Reed, facing his own legal tsunami, distanced himself immediately. We need to pause things until this blows over, he told Melanie by phone, not even risking a face-to-face meeting. Vivian, served with papers at her home, suffered a minor stress-induced stroke and was hospitalized. The preliminary hearing for her case was delayed. Through it all, Dom remained physically absent. His legal resurrection occurred without his bodily presence, a ghost wielding the machinery of law. On day 3 of what the local paper called the Russo Offensive, Melanie received a text from an unknown number, Glass House. 8 p.m. Come alone. She arrived to find the house dark. Using her key, she entered cautiously, calling out, but receiving no answer. In the great room overlooking the lake, a single lamp illuminated Dom's drafting table where architectural plans lay unfolded. But these weren't building plans. They were demolition schematics, detailed drawings showing the structural vulnerabilities of the glass house, the load-bearing points, the sequence required to collapse it while leaving the foundation intact. Melanie stared at the precision of the renderings, understanding that she was looking at a metaphor made literal. Dom had designed the systematic destruction of everything they'd built. Beautiful, isn't it? She whirled to find him standing in the shadows, leaner, harder, bearded, but unmistakably Dom. His voice was the same controlled tone she remembered, but his eyes held something new, something final. Nick, she breathed. You're here. I'm everywhere, he corrected her. I've always been. Watching. Planning. These legal attacks, she began, they're based on lies and every filing is supported by evidence you provided. Dom interrupted. Your words. Your actions. Your conspiracies. If this is about Reed, this isn't about your affair. Dom moved closer, his face illuminated by the lamp. Affairs and marriages. They don't require this. He gestured to the demolition plans. This is about betrayal on a different scale. You, your mother, Reed. You saw me as an obstacle to remove, an asset to strip mine. You discussed having me killed, Melanie. She shook her head frantically. That was Vivian talking wildly. We never intended. Intent is irrelevant. Planning is everything. He tapped the demolition schematics. And I'm a better planner than all of you combined. What do you want? Melanie asked, her voice small. I want you to understand what's happening, Dom said calmly. I've engineered a controlled demolition of your world. The business is already lost to you. The criminal investigations will continue regardless of what happens between us. Your mother will likely face charges. Reed has already abandoned you. And this house. He looked around at the glass walls reflecting their images. This house was always designed to fall. You're destroying everything out of spite, she accused. Dom actually laughed, a sound Melanie realized she hadn't heard in years. No, Mel. I'm clearing the foundation to rebuild. The question is whether you want to salvage anything for yourself. He pushed a folder across the drafting table. These are terms. Not for reconciliation, that's impossible. But for a controlled extraction that leaves you something. What's the alternative? She asked, not touching the folder. I continue exactly as planned. The legal assault. The criminal investigations. The professional destruction. The complete dismantling of the life you thought you were securing. His voice remained conversational. You'll still have your freedom, but little else. Melanie finally reached for the folder. Inside was a settlement agreement so comprehensive it covered contingencies she hadn't even considered. In exchange for her cooperation with investigations into Vivian and Reed, full relinquishment of any claim to the firm, and her complete departure from Lakeside County, she would receive a financial settlement sufficient to start over elsewhere. "Why offer me anything?" she asked. "Efficiency," Dom replied. "This ends the process faster. And," he paused, "we did build something real once, before ambition corrupted it." She studied him, searching for the man she'd married. "Did you ever love me? Did you ever see me?" he countered. "Not as an asset or a stepping stone, but as a man." The question hung between them, unanswered because they both knew the truth. "You have 24 hours, Dom said, moving toward the door. "After that, I proceed with the full demolition plan." As he reached the threshold, Melanie called after him. "How long were you planning this? The disappearance, the evidence gathering, all of it?" Dom paused. "I started documenting inconsistencies in your behavior 14 months ago. I established legal contingencies 8 months ago. I secured secondary properties and vehicles 6 months ago." He turned back to face her. "I designed that demolition plan the week we moved in. I design exit strategies for every structure I create, Melanie. It's what architects do." After he departed, Melanie stood alone in the glass house, surrounded by transparent walls that had hidden nothing, protected nothing. Outside, the lake reflected moonlight, beautiful and cold as the man who had built this perfect trap. She had 24 hours to decide between salvage and annihilation. Chapter 7. The Controlled Demolition. Dawn found Melanie still in the glass house, the settlement papers spread before her. She'd called Reed repeatedly throughout the night, but he'd stopped answering after their brief initial conversation. "I can't be connected to this," he'd told her. "My publisher is already talking about terminating my contract because of the publicity. I need to distance myself." "Distance yourself?" Melanie had echoed incredulously. "After everything we planned?" "We planned a divorce and a relationship," Reed clarified. "Not criminal conspiracies and bankruptcy." "I'm sorry, Melanie. I need to protect myself." She'd tried her mother next, but Vivian remained under observation at the hospital, sedated and unavailable. Portia was unwilling to discuss anything by phone, suspicious that her own husband might be recording their conversations. Isolated and facing a collapsing support system, Melanie finally did what Dom expected. She calculated her best remaining option and signed the settlement agreement. At precisely 8 a.m., Vincent Costello arrived to collect the documents. His professional demeanor never wavered as he reviewed her signatures. "Mr. Russo anticipated your decision," Vincent noted, handing her a sealed envelope. "Your flight arrangements. A car will collect you at noon." "Flight arrangements?" Melanie frowned. "To where?" "Phoenix. Mr. Russo thought the desert might provide a suitable contrast to your life here." Vincent's tone remained neutral. "The property there is modest but comfortable. All utilities are established in your name. A local bank account has been funded with your initial settlement amount." Melanie opened the envelope. Inside was a first-class ticket, address details, and bank information, all meticulously organized. "He planned for me to accept," she realized aloud. Vincent allowed himself a small smile. "Mr. Russo plans for all contingencies, Mrs. Russo. But yes, he considered this the most probable outcome. And if I'd refused?" Alternative arrangements were in place. Vincent checked his watch. "The movers will arrive shortly to pack your personal effects. The house contents remain with the property." "He's keeping the glass house?" Melanie asked, surprised. "Even with all the memories?" Vincent studied her curiously. "No, Mrs. Russo. The demolition begins tomorrow." While Melanie departed for Arizona, Dom emerged from seclusion. He established temporary residence in a downtown apartment and scheduled a meeting with the firm's employees. Carlo had prepared them, but seeing their founder in person, transformed by his months away, created a ripple of shock. Dom didn't waste time on explanations or apologies. "The firm continues," he announced. "All current projects proceed. Design innovations resume. The only change is leadership consolidation." Questions about Melanie were deflected. Questions about his absence went unanswered. Only when a junior designer asked about the glass house did Dom's composure shift subtly. "Watch the lakefront tomorrow at noon," he said. "Sometimes we need to witness endings to appreciate beginnings." The next day, a crowd gathered on the public beach below Dom's property. Word had spread that something unprecedented was planned. Dom stood apart, on a rock outcropping that offered the best vantage point of the house above. At precisely noon, a series of controlled explosions rippled through the structure. The precision was breathtaking. Each glass wall collapsed inward, the timber supports folded like a house of cards, the entire structure imploding into its foundation with minimal debris scatter. In less than 30 seconds, the iconic glass house was reduced to a perfect ruin contained entirely within its original footprint. Gasps rose from the crowd, followed by murmurs of disbelief. A local reporter approached Dom, recording device extended. "Mr. Russo, why destroy your most famous design? Was this a symbolic gesture related to your recent situation?" Dom studied the dust still settling above. That structure served its purpose. Now the foundation will support something new, something designed with different priorities. "What priorities are those?" the reporter pressed. Dom finally turned away from the demolition site, his expression unreadable. Solidity over transparency. Substance over appearance. He paused. Sometimes beauty is a distraction from structural weakness. I won't make that mistake again. The clip went viral within architectural circles, cementing Dom's reputation as both genius and enigma. Meanwhile, Reed's situation deteriorated rapidly. The lawsuit Dom had filed triggered a morality clause in his publishing contract. His latest manuscript was rejected. Literary events canceled his appearances. Most damaging was the leak of emails between Reed and Melanie, discussing how access to Dom's design expertise would elevate Reed's planned architecture-themed novel series. 3 weeks after Melanie's departure, Reed received a text. Boathouse. 7 p.m. He debated ignoring it, but curiosity and desperation won out. The boathouse sat at the edge of Dom's now empty property, a simple structure that had survived the main house demolition. Reed arrived to find Dom seated at a small table, a chessboard arranged between 2 chairs. "I didn't know you played," Reed said, attempting nonchalance. "There's much you don't know," Dom replied, gesturing to the empty chair. "Sit." Reed complied, noticing that the game was already in progress. "White or black?" "I'm both," Dom said. "I've been playing against myself while deciding your fate." The pretense of calm evaporated. "Look, Russo, what happened with Melanie?" "Is finished," Dom interrupted. "She chose settlement. Her mother faces charges, but will likely plead to reduced allegations given her health. Your situation, however, remains unresolved." Reed swallowed. "What do you want?" "A question that reveals your fundamental misunderstanding." Dom moved a black knight. "This isn't a negotiation. It's an education." For the next hour, Dom detailed Reed's systematic destruction, not through physical violence or criminal charges, but through something more insidious, complete professional discreditation. The copyright infringement suit against Reed's upcoming architectural thriller would proceed, supported by evidence that he had stolen conceptual elements from Dom's protected designs. The tortious interference case would block him from publishing in related fields. Most devastatingly, Dom had provided Reed's publisher with proof that his previously acclaimed works contained plagiarized passages. "You're salting the earth," Reed realized, his writer's instinct recognizing the metaphor. "Ensuring nothing grows." "I'm enforcing consequences," Dom corrected. "You sought to appropriate my life's work for your storylines. You pursued my wife to access my expertise. You positioned yourself to benefit from my destruction." He advanced a white bishop. "Did you really believe there would be no response?" "I didn't think you were capable of this level of calculation," Reed admitted. Dom almost smiled. "No one does. That's why it works." He stood, leaving the chess game unfinished. "Your career is over, Reed. Not because I'm vengeful, but because I'm thorough. The lawsuits will drain your finances. The plagiarism evidence will destroy your credibility. The industry connections will evaporate." "You've thought of everything," Reed said bitterly. "No," Dom corrected him. "I simply planned while you improvised. Creation requires vision. Destruction merely requires attention to detail." He left Reed at the chess table, surrounded by symbolic pieces representing a game that had concluded long before they sat down. Chapter 8. Foundations Exposed. Vivian Pearson had always considered herself the architect of her family's advancement. She'd orchestrated Melanie's education, career path, and even her marriage to Dom, a union Vivian had viewed as strategic rather than romantic. The Russo name, connections, and growing wealth were assets Vivian had selected for her daughter's portfolio. Now, from her hospital bed, she watched her careful construction collapse. Her minor stroke had evolved into a convenient shield against immediate legal proceedings, but Dom's methodical approach had accounted for this possibility. Rather than pursuing her directly, he had leveraged Todd's evidence to launch investigations into financial improprieties within her long-standing role as treasurer for the Lakeside Historical Society. "They're calling it embezzlement," Portia informed her, pacing the hospital room. 20 years of misappropriated funds, Mom. All meticulously documented. "Who's behind this?" Vivian demanded, her speech slightly slurred from medication. "Todd." That weasel finally grew a spine. Portia shook her head. "Todd provided initial evidence, but the documentation goes deeper. These are records only you and the board had access to." "And who sits on that board?" Vivian asked pointedly. "Carlo's wife," Portia realized. "Dom's project manager's wife." "Dominic's reach is longer than we anticipated," Vivian conceded. "Where's your sister? She should be handling this." Portia's expression hardened. "Melanie took Dom's settlement and disappeared to Arizona. Reed's facing professional ruin. You're under investigation." "And me?" She laughed bitterly. "Todd's filed for divorce and moved out. Apparently, he's been documenting my affairs for years." "Affairs? Plural?" Vivian's eyebrows rose. "Don't act surprised," Portia snapped. "You knew. You even covered for me with that tennis instructor 3 summers ago." Vivian waved this away. "Strategic indiscretions are different from stupid risks. The point is, we need to consolidate our position. If Melanie accepted a settlement, we should consider similar options." "There are no options, Mom," Portia insisted. "Dom isn't interested in settlements with us. He's dismantling everything." "Everyone has a price," Vivian argued. "Find Vincent Costello. Feel out what it would take to make this go away." But Vincent, when finally cornered outside his office, was unequivocal. "Mrs. Pearson's situation is beyond negotiation." Mr. Russo was explicit about this point. "There must be something she could offer," Portia pressed. "Information? Public apology?" Vincent studied her with something approaching pity. "You still don't understand. This isn't about leverage or exchanges. Your mother orchestrated a plan to defraud Mr. Russo of his company and possibly endanger his life. The consequences aren't negotiable." "So what happens now?" Portia demanded. "The Historical Society investigation proceeds. The criminal conspiracy charges advance. The civil suits continue." Vincent straightened his tie. "Mrs. Pearson faces financial ruin and potential incarceration. At her age and with her health, the latter might be reduced to house arrest, but the former is inevitable." As he turned to leave, Portia called after him. "And what about me? What's my sentence in Dom's grand punishment scheme?" Vincent paused. "Interestingly, Mr. Russo made no specific plans regarding you. He said your life with Todd was punishment enough, and once that ended, your own limitations would determine your fate." The assessment stung with its accuracy. Without Todd's financial support, Portia had no viable income. Her part-time real estate work under Melanie's business had evaporated. Her history of extramarital affairs had alienated most friends. At 41, with no career, no husband, and soon no mother's support, Portia faced exactly what Dom had predicted, limitations of her own making. 2 days later, Vivian suffered a major stroke. As machines monitored her diminished vital signs, Portia sat beside her unconscious mother, scrolling through apartment listings she couldn't afford. A text message interrupted her search. "Hospital cafeteria." Now, she found Dom waiting, a coffee cup in front of him, another across the table. He looked nothing like the controlled, reserved architect she remembered from family gatherings. This man radiated contained power. "Sit," he said, pushing the coffee toward her. Portia remained standing. "Come to gloat while my mother dies upstairs." "Your mother will survive," Dom replied. "Her brain activity is stable. The doctors expect partial recovery." "How would you know that?" "Her medical information is protected." Dom's expression didn't change. "Very little is truly protected, Portia. That's something your family never understood." She finally sat. "What do you want?" "To clarify your position," he said. "You're collateral damage in this situation, involved but not central. I have no specific intentions regarding your future." "How magnanimous," Portia bit out. "You've destroyed my sister, bankrupted my mother, and triggered my divorce. but you graciously have no specific intentions for me. Dom sipped his coffee. Your sister made choices. Your mother made plans. Your husband documented your betrayals. I merely provided the structure for consequences. And now I'm homeless and jobless. More consequences. Now you're facing reality without buffers, Dom corrected. Something few in your family have experienced. He pushed an envelope across the table. A proposition. Not mercy, I want that clear. Inside was information about a property management position at a resort in northern Wisconsin, far from Lakeside County. The job included housing accommodations. Why would you help me? Portia asked suspiciously. I'm not helping you. I'm removing a distraction. Dom stood. The position starts next month. Accept or decline. It makes no difference to my plans. But it's the only lifeline you'll receive. As he walked away, Portia called after him. Was any of it real? What you felt for Melanie? This family? Dom stopped. Without turning, he answered. I designed a life I thought was structurally sound. I was wrong. He continued walking. I don't make the same mistake twice. Meanwhile, in Phoenix, Melanie attempted to rebuild from ashes. The modest house Dom had arranged was comfortable, but purposely ordinary. Nothing like the architectural showcase they'd shared. The settlement funds provided security, but not luxury. Most disorienting was the absence of identity. In Lakeside, she'd been Melanie Russo, wife of the brilliant architect, successful realtor to the elite. In Phoenix, she was nobody, a middle-aged woman starting over without connections or reputation. She tried contacting Reed, but his numbers were disconnected. Her mother remained hospitalized. Portia responded to texts with increasing bitterness. Even former friends and clients had distanced themselves, wary of Dom's demonstrated capacity for methodical retribution. 1 month into her exile, Melanie received a package. Inside was a small architectural model, a perfect miniature of the glass house before its destruction. No note accompanied it, but she understood the message. Remember what was lost. She placed the model on her mantle, a reminder of ambition's cost. Some nights, she would sit staring at its tiny walls, wondering at what point the foundation had begun to crack. Chapter 9. The Builder's Legacy. 1 year after the glass house imploded, Dominic Russo unveiled his new home on the same foundation. Unlike its predecessor, this structure was primarily timber and stone, materials that aged with character rather than revealed every flaw. Glass elements remained, but strategically placed to capture light rather than expose interiors. The architectural community hailed it as his finest residential design, a mature statement on privacy and revelation. What no one outside Dom's inner circle understood was that the house represented his personal reconstruction. Carlo, now a full partner in the renamed Russo Design Group, oversaw the invitation-only reception that marked the home's completion. The county's elite gathered, curious to see both the revolutionary design and its enigmatic creator. Dom had changed in the year since his return. The hardness remained, but the beard was gone, replaced by a precision-trimmed goatee that complemented his now silver-streaked hair. He moved through the crowd with contained energy, discussing architectural theory with colleagues, but revealing nothing personal. Vincent Costello observed from a corner, nursing a single scotch. He's rebuilt more than a house, the lawyer noted to Carlo. He's reinvented himself. Carlo nodded. The firm's stronger than ever. 3 international commissions, the Chicago Cultural Center project, and requests we can't possibly fulfill. And the personal cost? Vincent asked quietly. Before Carlo could respond, the crowd parted to admit a late arrival. Todd, Portia's ex-husband. The accountant approached Dom with visible nervousness, extending his hand. Their conversation was brief, but appeared cordial. When Todd departed, Dom returned to his position overlooking the lake, his expression unchanged. There's your answer, Carlo told Vincent. He acknowledges allies, but maintains distance. The professional thrives while the personal remains selective. Later that evening, after guests departed, Dom sat alone on his terrace. The new house settled around him with timber creaks and stone solidity. Sounds fundamentally different from the glass house's silence. His phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. The model arrived. A reminder or a warning. Melanie. He'd wondered if she would contact him after receiving the miniature glass house. Dom considered ignoring the message. The demolition of their shared life was complete. Vivian had avoided prison due to her health, but remained under house arrest, her finances decimated by restitution payments. Reed had retreated to obscurity in the Midwest, his literary career unsalvageable. Portia had accepted the resort position, disappearing into the northern woods. Melanie herself existed in a limbo of Dom's design, comfortable enough to survive, but stripped of the status and connections that had driven her ambition. The legal machinery Dom had set in motion continued grinding forward without requiring his attention. The firm prospered under his renewed vision. The new house stood complete. There was no tactical advantage in responding to her message. Yet Dom found himself typing. Neither. Acknowledgement. Her reply came quickly. Of what was lost, or what was never real. He set the phone down without answering. Some questions had no meaningful response. Or perhaps too many possible answers, none of them useful to either receiver or sender. Inside his new home, Dom moved to his private study where architectural plans for his next project were spread across his drafting table. Not another residence, but a community center for at-risk youth. A structure designed to support rather than showcase, to shelter rather than impress. The design incorporated lessons from both destruction and reconstruction, resilient materials, multiple support systems, foundations dug deeper than standard requirements, a building that could weather storms literal and metaphorical. Dom added final notations to the plans, satisfaction replacing the cold purpose that had driven him through months of calculated vengeance. He had demolished a life built on false assumptions and constructed a new one based on clearer vision. The phone chimed again. He expected another message from Melanie, but instead found a text from his father. The underground time served its purpose. The new foundation is solid. Dom smiled slightly. His father, now in his 80s, remained the only person who truly understood the transformation Dom had engineered, not just of his circumstances, but of himself. He texted back, "The builder endures. The structure adapts." His father's response was immediate, as it should be. Dom set the phone aside and returned to his designs, the past finally sealed beneath a foundation strong enough to support whatever he chose to build next. In Phoenix, Melanie stared at her unanswered message, the miniature glass house gleaming in moonlight from her mantel. She understood now what she'd failed to see during their marriage. Dom's quietness had never been weakness but calculation, his attention to detail never obsession but strategy, his patience never indecision but timing. She placed her phone face down. Some conversations were destined to remain unfinished, some questions eternally unanswered. The glass house had fallen, its transparent walls proving ultimately indefensible. All that remained was to build something new from the understanding that some structures, once broken, could never be restored, only remembered as warnings against foundation flaws too fundamental to repair. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.